Great, you can now create basic Python programs using variables and functions. But before we go any further, there is one thing you need to clearly understand, and this is the scope of a variable, or what can be called also as the visibility of a variable. Depending on where you create a variable, it may or may not be accessible from another part of the programs. So let's take an example here. Let's say I create my variable a equals 5. So of course I can print a, no problem, this will work. Okay, so let's save it here as scope. So this works because a is in the same scope here when we use it here and when we use it here. And now let me create a function here. Let's say print a, okay, just very dumb function that will simply print a here. So if I run it, of course nothing is printing because I'm not calling that function. So I need to call that function so it can run. And we can see that it works. Okay, we have 5 here, which is the result of print a. And this works because a was defined here. And now we actually use it here. Now let's create another function, def create b. And I'm going to create a variable named b and with the value 10. Okay. And what I'm going to do here is print b. Okay, so I create b and then I print b. And let's see what happens here. We have an error. Name b is not defined in line 10. Okay, so you can see line 10 here. Name b is not defined. Why is that? Well, this is basically because b here is not on the same scope as here. So when you create a variable at the top of your program here without any indentation, you can use it everywhere after that. It is what we call a global variable. When you create a variable inside a block of code with indentation, as you can see here, for example, inside that function, then the variable is a local variable. The b variable is here created inside the function. So it means that we cannot use it outside of this indented block of code. After the block of code is executed, then the variable is gone. The only way to access that variable is between its creation here and the end of the block of code, which is here immediate. The rule with scope is very simple. A variable will be visible in the scope it is created in and in every nested scope inside this initial scope. So when you have the variable a here, which is in the global scope, it is visible from this scope. So if I do print a, it will work. And when I use the variable a inside a block of code that has more indentation than a, it works, okay? But the variable we create here in a more indented block of code will not be accessible inside a less indented block of code. So that's why we have the error with print b, because we are trying to access a variable which is declared in a more nested scope from a more global scope. And for now, we only have one level of indentation, but then you will see that you can have much more levels, which means that we have more nested scopes. If I go back to the function, let's open the functions. Okay, here. As you can see, we have number and number here. So basically, when you create a function, the parameters you give there, so you have to give a name. And what it will do here is it will create a local variable inside that function. Okay, so the variable number will be created here and it will be assigned a value at the moment when you actually call the function. So here you assign the value from a, which is 2. So when you call triple number, number will be assigned an integer value from this line. And then number will be alive until you actually go out of this block of code at this point. So you return the value here, number times 3, and then the number variable is destroyed. And that's why you can actually have the same name, okay, in two different scopes, okay. This scope is completely different from that scope here, okay. Two different scopes. So you can have the same name for the two different arguments. They will not conflict between each other, okay? And there is no way from that actually block of code to get access to that variable here. So when working with variables, always keep in mind the scope of the variables. Is this variable declared in a more general or a more local scope? And in the scope that I am currently writing in, can I get access to this variable? Once you get used to it, it's fairly simple to spot the scope of any variable. And of course, we are going to come back to this a lot of time during this course.